Adding an additional hard drive to the ASUS K501UW. One of the reasons I chose and purchased this particular laptop was that while it does have a 512 gigabyte SSD in it, there is, according to other reviewers on Amazon anyways, a empty hard drive slot in there. Have a few just laying around, figured I'd format a 500 gigabyte one, open it up and see if it would work. As you can see here, just working on getting the screws out. Always be prepared and have something out that you can throw the screws in, much like I did not have to start with. Fortunately, I was able to find one of my son's phonics books and throw them right onto the back of that since it has a nice curve to it. In this particular one, there's 3 small screws in the front, 2 small screws on the side that are slightly longer on either side, and 4 long screws in the back. As far as first impressions of this laptop so far, it does have the i7, the 6500U, which is doing fairly well. It's what I did this particular video on. It also has the GTX 960, and so far it's actually been able to play everything I've thrown at it. Most demanding thing is probably Overwatch, and it can run it in Ultra with no problems, running over 60 frames per second the whole time. Never noticing any dips. Can't complain at all. Alright, as you can see, still taking out the screws. They do have a little bit of Loctite on it, so it does take a bit of effort to get them going at first. But once they go, you're good. I'd probably recommend putting a tiny drop of Loctite on there when you put them back in. I still haven't, but first day with it, so I'm probably still going to open it back up later and see about getting another stick of RAM. It came with 8 gigs. Supposedly there's a room for another 8 gig stick in there, so upgrading it to 16. Ultimately, once I had the screws out, you got to search for a place to pry it up. I found it was easiest to do over by the back there. This is just showing you where I was able to pop it up. That had already been taken out. There are clips. It's going to take a little bit of effort to get off. I just did not want to scratch it. You can put a little electrical tape there as well. There's the old Toshiba satellite notebook hard drive going in. I actually went the opposite way of the previous one. I probably should have taken a look at the connections first, which I did not. There we are, figuring it out. Slide it in. Make sure it seats correctly. As you can see there, I'm pointing out where you've got screws to secure it later on. The hard drive already has the screws built in as well. You just have to actually acquire them. I'll have to pull them out of the old one, but first I'm going to make sure it works. There is a piece of rubber there, so the hard drive is actually fairly secure in there. It probably doesn't need it, but never be too careful. Make sure when you go to put it back on that all of the clips on the side, the front, the back, they're all snug and tight. When you finish, you shouldn't see any gaps. You should be able to look down through the screw holes and see that they are all directly lined up. If they're not, then you've got something off. Take it back off and try again. I've just taken apart several laptops, so lined it up right. Again, remember 4 long screws go along the back where the monitor hinge is. 2 medium screws in the middle, 1 on either side, and then the 4 in the bottom. The 4 in the bottom, you'll see here in a minute, are at a slight angle. Didn't really notice that taking them out, but when I went to go put them back in, I saw that I had to angle them just a little bit. So just a heads up, just because you don't want to end up cross-threading a screw. I didn't put any torque into it just because it wasn't going in, checked it, shone a little light in there, and then saw, okay, this was the issue. Back to the performance on this thing. This 6500U is, so far for rendering video, has been more than sufficient. It's not going to replace a desktop processor, but then again, it only burns 15 watts. You can only expect so much of it. Also, while I'm putting in the rest of the screws here. Another apology is that for some reason I had my camera stuck on fisheye for this entire video, and I don't usually do that. There's not a stylistic choice. I just bumped the features on the front of my camera, put it on there, and am far too lazy to recapture the video. So enjoy fisheye lens. Everything's better through a fisheye lens, right? Another thing of note, you'll see here in a minute, but the boot up on this thing is actually that through that SSD. I'm not sure. I didn't take a look while I was in there to see if it was PCIe or what sort of interface it was using, if it was SATA, but it is incredibly fast boot up. My current PC has a 512 gig Samsung 850 through a SATA 2 port. Yeah, it's a little older motherboard. It doesn't have SATA 3, but this one is just so fast on the boot up. You'll see here in just a second as I finish putting in the last screw. Flip it back over. There we go. Hook in my mouse, hook in my power, try to put the USB for the mouse in the HDMI port, try to put it in upside down. That's just how I roll. There we go. Starting to boot. And little under 10 seconds from pushing the power button to being in the screen. And there you see, we've got our C drive with 476 gigabytes free, or not free, but available to 512, and 453 of the new drive that has been added. So there we go, adding a hard drive to the ASUS K501UW.